That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, literally every single day for about the past 3 months now, I've had to go through and tell people, I promise you, I'm working on the rankings. They are going to be out. I promise you, I'm getting you the rankings. And they are officially out over there on Patreon, our Dynasty Flock Patreon rankings for the 2021 season. Now, no, these are not going to be set in stone. I initially said that they were going to, but I decided to do it more so as a Google spreadsheet. That way, when we have any official news that comes out, I can go over there and I can make those updates where need be. I mean, think about the Julio Jones trade. I mean, just think about what we're getting with Laviska Shenault at OTAs right now. So they are subject to change. But what I really want from everybody supporting the show over there on Patreon is pull up that post, take a good look at those rankings, and go back to the post and leave a comment letting me know my worst ranking in something I need to relook at. Because we've already had someone coming out and kind of pushing me in a direction where now I think we possibly are going to be having to move Robert Woods up the rankings. But yeah, please let me know what y'all think. And here we are going to dive into the quarterback section of those rankings. I'm going to be going through and talking about the top 2 tiers and why I rank players as I did. But of course, before we get into it, go down there, drop that like, leave that comment, subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out a ton. And I'm really hoping we can hit 7,000 subscribers before the football season starts, which is entirely possible. But yeah, let's dive into it. And drum roll, please. Let's get into the first player in these rankings. And to nobody's surprise, it's Patrick Mahomes. I mean, there is very little to say here. Mahomes, a quarterback with a $500 million contract, 25 years old. I don't even know if we should dive into the numbers. I will just talk about how dominant Patrick Mahomes has been, because I saw some stuff circulating around Twitter where people were trying to say Josh Allen was the quarterback one in Dynasty. And the reason I saw that circulating, even though I'm not following anybody, is because as soon as something happens like that, I mean, you're getting that sent to you. You're getting those mentions dropped underneath. And what's hilarious is people just don't understand that people trying to pump up Josh Allen to be the quarterback one in Dynasty, anybody trying to make an argument for it not to be Patrick Mahomes, is either one of two things. They're either so stupid that their opinion should never be listened to, and I very rarely say that, and I say that with a grain of salt because I am very stupid in my own right, but that's one possibility. And the second possibility, which is way more likely and most likely the case, is they are smart enough to understand, hey, if I go and I have this take that makes no sense at all, people are going to come, people are going to retweet that, people are going to drop in the mentions telling me how stupid I am, and it's going to go quote unquote trending on Twitter and get some discussion around it. So please, if you see someone talking about Josh Allen or any quarterback being ranked ahead of Patrick Mahomes in Dynasty, understand that it's only one of the two options, because Mahomes is the answer every single time. He's actually in tier 1 alone. And with Patrick Mahomes, this past season, he was the quarterback 3 in fantasy in points per game if you take Dak Prescott out of it, because Dak Prescott, only 5 games. I mean, that's such a small sample where I think we can be overlooking that. And with that mark where he was the quarterback 3, what you really want to be looking at is 2 key statistics for passing volume in trying to look at it correlating season to season. So we know the 2 main things that are going to be driving fantasy points are going to be adjusted yards per pass attempt and passing touchdown percentage. Now, you can naturally assume that passing touchdown percentage as well as adjusted yards per pass attempt are going to be slightly skewed higher for the players that are playing in those potent offenses, those quarterbacks that you're going to have at the top of your rankings regardless. But between the 2 statistics, adjusted yards per pass attempt is actually significantly better at correlating season to season to season if you could look at a large macro sense of the statistic. And compared to touchdown percentage on a season, I mean, that stat is going to be extremely volatile. I mean, touchdown percentage is something you want to be fading over and over and over again, which is why this past football year, we were not drafting Lamar Jackson in the 2nd round. That is why in 2019, we weren't drafting Patrick Mahomes in the 2nd round, because it's a very key concept that you can understand in fantasy. The player that has the unsustainable touchdown rate, that's the player you can fade. But regardless, diving into these numbers, Mahomes was 3rd in his adjusted yards per pass attempt, and he was 7th in his passing touchdown percentage, which for Mahomes, I mean, that is completely sustainable. Now in 2019, you see something very similar here. I mean, he was the quarterback 3 if you remove the week that he left early due to injury last season. And it was off of great efficiency with his yards per adjusted pass attempt, where he was actually 3rd in the NFL yet again there. And he had a 5.4% touchdown percentage, which was 8th in the NFL, which should be completely sustainable for Patrick Mahomes. And if you're looking for the ceiling play on Mahomes, you're going, okay, we already saw what you can most likely expect. You know Mahomes is going to finish as a top 3 quarterback every year. What's best case scenario here? Well, best case scenario was back in 2018, that breakout season, not his rookie season, but pretty much where he only played 1 game in his rookie year, and this was his 2nd year. So his first time as a full starter through the season. And he was the quarterback 1 in fantasy, and he averaged 26.3 points per game. That was 14% higher than the 2nd best quarterback, giving you a significant edge at the position. And he actually had an 8.6% passing touchdown rate, which obviously is unsustainable, which is obviously why he was being overdrafted in 2019 when he was going in the 2nd round of redraft leagues. But yeah, also he was 1st in adjusted yards per pass attempt, which clearly is possible for Mahomes any season. So there's nothing to say. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, a quarterback that's going to be a top 3 option for the next decade. Lock him in at the 101 in any Superflex startup. This is a player that is a true cornerstone asset if you have ever seen one. Now we are going to be dropping down to the tier 2 of quarterbacks. And I will mention that Patrick Mahomes, across all the positions in those rankings, is the only player that makes up tier 1 by himself. Now in tier 2, we are going to lead this off with Kyler Murray. Okay, so here with Kyler Murray, only 23 years old, going into year 3, and he just finished as the quarterback 1 in 2020 in points per game through week 16 if you take away the Dak Prescott performance, because we know Dak, very small sample, but he did this with a combination of both passing and rushing. He did this with 819 rushing yards, 11 rushing touchdowns. Both were 2nd in the NFL at the quarterback position. And that's something that you expected with Kyler Murray. That's why he was the clear 101 option in Dynasty Superflex rookie drafts in 2019. And here with Kyler, I mean, if I was stuck at the 102 in a current Dynasty Startup Superflex league, I think Kyler would be the correct answer, because this is a quarterback that did this off of not great efficiency passing. We understand that the Arizona Cardinals and Cliff Kingsbury have kind of been called the horizontal raid, where you're going to be expecting the pass attempts to be up, but you're not looking at Kyler Murray aggressively pursuing the ball downfield right now. But I would make the argument that's more so based on the talent profile that you've had with this offense, where you really haven't had any speed on this team outside of Andy Isabella. And Andy Isabella, as the only guy with that speed, clearly extremely disappointing through the first 2 years of his own NFL career. And I think at this point, we can all naturally assume that Andy Isabella is not going to be cut out to be an NFL wide receiver. Well, now you have that speed being added in with Rondale Moore. You also have a player that I don't want to say is going to be great, but at least AJ Green, based on what we've had from Larry Fitzgerald over the past 2 years, should be an upgrade on Larry Fitzgerald at the very least. So you're getting an upgrade in the wide receiver room, and all of a sudden you look at Kyler Murray, someone that was 21st in the NFL in yards per adjusted pass attempt and 19th in the NFL in his touchdown passing percentage. And I think both of these actually have room to go up. And like we already stated, he was the quarterback 1 in points per game in weeks 1 through 16 last year. And he did this with Hopkins, Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, Chase Edmonds, and Dan Arnold as his best options on this team. Well, now make those options DeAndre Hopkins, Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, and AJ Green. I think this is going to be an upgrade. And I mean, this is back-to-back years that you've had a very impressive season from Kyler Murray, because we go back to 2019 where he was actually the quarterback 12 in points per game as a rookie. I mean, that's something that Joe Burrow didn't come close to doing. And he did this by finishing 2nd in the NFL yet again in rushing yards. He actually kind of got unlucky with rushing touchdowns, where despite being 2nd in the NFL in yards, he was only 4th, and he was tied with 5 other players, so you could call him 9th in rushing touchdowns at the position. But you have to focus in on the fact that in 2019, his rookie season, his best options were the corpse of Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, David Johnson, and Damiere Byrd. I mean, this is a quarterback that has seen upgrade after upgrade after upgrade in his wide receiver room through his NFL career so far. In his second season, he already finished as the top quarterback in fantasy. Now give him more upgrades to the wide receiver room. Let him progress even further, because we know quarterbacks aren't going to peak in year 2. And I'm really excited to see what we can have from Kyler Murray. So now let's go down to Josh Allen. So Josh Allen is going to be our third quarterback, despite I know a lot of people want to be putting him at number 2 overall. And with Allen, I mean, if you do look at weeks 1 through 17 and the blow-up performance in week 17 from the Buffalo Bills, you could call Josh Allen the quarterback 1 in fantasy. But because, I mean, week 17 is so volatile with what you're seeing from different teams just completely taking the week off, from what you have with an injury standpoint at that week, and also motivations just not lining up throughout the league, I really like to prefer to look at weeks 1 through 16 for our timetable, where Josh Allen was the quarterback 2 in points per game. But obviously, not a massive difference between being the quarterback 2 and quarterback 1 if you're talking about a season finish. And he did this with a combination of passing and rushing. And this is the new age quarterback in the NFL. I mean, this is what you look for in fantasy, where he was 8th in the NFL in touchdown percentage, and he was 6th in the NFL in adjusted passing yards per attempt. Now, I will say I am a little bit worried given the fact that with Josh Allen, while yes, he was just extremely impressive this past season, what you have to understand is this is a team that loses John Brown. I think it's safe to say that Emmanuel Sanders is definitely a downgrade at the position. It sounds like Cole Beasley may not be playing this upcoming season. Cole Beasley, not a fantastic wide receiver by any means, but when you're looking at a wide receiver room that has Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, and Emmanuel Sanders, and then literally nobody else after that, I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is 33 years old. This is a reason to start getting concerned for what the situation is going to be looking like for Josh Allen. And you can't necessarily say he has a great pass-catching tight end. I mean, Dawson Knox, while yes, I have him on a lot of my Dynasty rosters coming off the taxi squad this offseason, but the situation on a whole is getting worse for Josh Allen from what it was last year, which kind of is going in the opposite direction for Kyler Murray. So that's my initial thought process on having Josh Allen a slot after Kyler Murray. And also, you see in 2019 that Josh Allen in his second season was the quarterback 9 in fantasy. And he did this with him being 3rd in rushing yards and not necessarily being up there in his passing efficiency, which is what I want to focus in on with a Kyler Murray. Because Kyler Murray had a very similar season where he didn't necessarily have a passing efficiency in his second year. But what you had with Josh Allen is the ability to make that major leap in year 3, which I think we can safely project for Kyler Murray to do as well, which is why Kyler Murray, personally for me, is going to be an easy answer over Josh Allen at quarterback 2. Now, going to quarterback 3, we are going to be having Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson, only 24 years old, but I understand if someone wants to say, well, Mason, Lamar is not going to be the fantasy option that you're going to have with a passing first quarterback over the next decade. That's completely fair. I'm not even sitting here saying Lamar Jackson, someone you build around for the next 8 to 9 years. I think that's a way overrated thing in Dynasty to begin with. But anyway, you're looking at Lamar Jackson as a player that could easily crush fantasy leagues this upcoming season. I mean, in a down year in 2020, Lamar Jackson managed to finish as the quarterback 7 in points per game. He did this with being 15th in the NFL in adjusted yards per attempt. And obviously, first in rushing, you're always going to be expecting Lamar Jackson to be the top rushing option at the quarterback position in the NFL. But what I want to look at is the fact that Lamar was throwing so many balls to talent that shouldn't even be touching an NFL field. I mean, his top options this past year in the overall targets that they accrued were Hollywood Brown at 1, Mark Andrews at 2, Willie Snead at 3, Miles Boykin at 4, and Devin Duvernay at 5. Well, I think that you can look at both Miles Boykin and Devin Duvernay and say, hey, they both have the potential to progress into something that can be exciting. I mean, in 2020, they were very, very bad wide receivers. This is coming from someone who's a massive Devin Duvernay fan. So, JN, if you're watching this, my man, please don't be coming at me for this. But anyway, we can all agree that that was one of the worst passing cores in the NFL this past year. And in 2019, with a passing core just as bad. I mean, here you have Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown, Willie Snead, Nick Boyle, Hayden Hurst, and Seth Roberts as the main core for this passing offense. You actually have Lamar Jackson finishing as the quarterback 1 in points per game. And not only was he the quarterback 1, but he was nearly 20% better than the second best quarterback on a points per game basis. So he was someone that if you didn't have him in fantasy, I mean, good luck trying to do anything, because he was going through and just crushing every single week. And he did this because, I mean, he was extremely unsustainable with his passing touchdown percentage. I mean, he was first in the NFL. It wasn't even close there, but he was actually third in the NFL in adjusted yards per pass attempt. So Lamar hasn't necessarily been as bad as people want to talk about, just because, I mean, Lamar, obviously, if you're talking about just his arm strength, it looks really bad at some times. I'm sure we've all seen the Pro Bowl clip of him just not being able to hit a single target. But what you like with Lamar Jackson is his ability on the ground opens up so many easy passes for him, where he's not asked to make the same kind of throws that you would expect from Sam Darnold. I mean, Sam Darnold, you could make the argument, maybe has just as talented of an arm as Lamar Jackson. But the difference between the two is the defense has to account for an extra player on the field when Lamar Jackson is there. And that creates so much more space for everybody. And that creates so many more opportunities for Lamar Jackson to be able to not have to put the ball in a small window. You get the significant upgrade throughout the entire roster, bringing in Rashad Bateman, bringing in Sammy Watkins, bringing in Tylan Wallace. And all of a sudden, this is a team that should be drastically better. So Lamar, I mean, he has the potential to come out and be the quarterback 1 in fantasy again, only 24 years old. So we're going to have him down here at quarterback 3. So now our next guy is going to be Dak Prescott. And we're going to keep this brief. But here with Dak Prescott, I mean, you're looking at this as a quarterback that has a core around him of Amari Cooper, of CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. Now, I would make the argument that this is possibly the best wide receiver core in the entire NFL. Y'all know I am a massive fan of both Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, so I'm a little bit biased in that. But with Dak Prescott, we actually saw the efficiency just be through the roof this past season. I mean, he was finished as the quarterback 1 in points per game in 2020. Now, it was a very small sample, so you can pretty much take it out just because, I mean, when we're evaluating the other quarterbacks, we're also taking Dak Prescott out. So it's hard to take away too much from this. But he played 5 games, finished as the quarterback 1 on a points per game basis. And in 2019, that's a year where he played fully. I think that you can safely look at that 2019 season and try to move that with Dak Prescott. He was still a top 5 quarterback in that scenario. He finished as the quarterback 5, and he was the quarterback 8 in rushing yards on the season. So that 2019 season, I want to point out the fact that that was the year where you just have Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Now, 2020, that's when you bring in CeeDee Lamb. So you would naturally expect the overall passing efficiency of this offense to drastically rise, which it did at the beginning of this past season. I will say that if we were not worried about this wide receiver core being broken up next offseason, I mean, Dak Prescott would definitely jump up ahead of Lamar Jackson. And if you're playing in a 6-point passing touchdown league, Dak Prescott definitely jumps up ahead of Lamar. I mean, I think you can make the argument for Dak Prescott all the way up at quarterback 3, quarterback 2, if you're playing in a 6-point passing touchdown league. But here we are talking about 4-point passing touchdown leagues. So after this, we will be dropping down to the quarterback 3 in tiers. But of course, you can find that over there on Patreon for everybody supporting the channel. And yeah, I'll be coming back tomorrow. I'll be talking about some running back rankings. After that, we can talk about some wide receivers. After that, we can talk about some tight ends. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you're dropping that like, or YouTube's not going to recommend you the video next time we upload it. And yeah, I'll see y'all with that next video. Let me know in the comment section if anything's wrong with these rankings. Thank you to everybody supporting the show. We got some new members of the flock in Robert, Caden, Matt, Robbie, Dan, John, Ziggy, Blake, Oliver, and Devin. Thank you, my dudes.